Welcome to this week's press conference, heading into a night game at Lamar, 6 p.m. kick on ESPN Plus on Saturday. Head coach Travis Johansen here. We'll let him open with some opening comments, and then we will popcorn through the media. Coach, go ahead.
Yeah, appreciate everybody. Yeah, I think number one, obviously coming off a week at Iowa State where we wanted to play better football. Certainly, a test for us and one that we wanted to put ourselves in early in the season. You find out a lot about where you're at and what you need to do to improve to be a championship caliber team. And certainly playing one like that gave us a lot of insight as to improvements need to make. So we're excited to attack that this week against a good Lamar team. Certainly 6 p.m. kick, long travel, getting ourselves down to a hot, humid environment and all the things that come around that, along with the improvements are certainly on focus this week. And looking forward to having a great week and getting down there and competing against a team that, we're certainly returning a trip on from the 23 season. So excited about the week and certainly the improvement we'll make from game 1 to game 2.
Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, obviously, like you said, Iowa State's a high-octane team this year. Just what would you like to see?
Sorry, Alex, lost you there. One more time.
Obviously, like you said, Iowa State, high-octane team with Rocco and all the guys they have on offense. Just what would you like to see change defensively going into game 2?
Yeah, I think for us, it's the execution in an environment like that. When you watch guys really do all the things that we were going to ask them to do on Saturday successfully, right here in Vermillion, and then not have as high of an execution standard when we're in the actual environment versus a really good team like that. You want to see it carry over to the games. We've got a capable unit and capable guys, and but didn't get the job done Saturday the way it needed to get done, and we certainly recognize that. You see a downtick as the kind of the levels raise up. You're not in a practice setting anymore, and with 15 guys playing their first game for the Yotes for us, we saw too much of that on Saturday, and that team will make you pay for it. Got a good quarterback and a great group of skill players around them.
And then Lamar kind of faced a similar thing with North Texas last week. Just what did you see on film so far on how to kind of attack their defense?
Yeah, I think they're probably, thinking a lot of the same things. They probably watched the tape and felt like they could have played better. For us, we've got to do what we always do. We got to establish run game. I thought we did that, quite a bit especially early in the game at Iowa State. And, we've got to execute a great run game plan and give ourselves like always, the ability to be two-dimensional the entire game.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach.
You bet.
Zach, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. Obviously, I know the team went down there with high expectations to Ames on Saturday. Disappointing result. But how do you kind of, after a game like that, especially with these FBS games, how do you kind of rebuild them back up, especially going back to the next week? Because I know those are kind of those showcase games, and you look forward to them so much. And whatever the result, how do you kind of just rebuild, especially from those games?
Yeah, I think our guys understand why we want to play those games and what we're trying to accomplish out of them. And whether you win or you lose them, you're competitive or you're not, it's about the response from that game. Our objectives weren't going to live and die. Our aspirations weren't going to live and die with that game. We certainly wanted to win the game, and we were going to do everything to win every single football game and execute at a high level. But for us to have our season be what we want it to be, learning those, lessons in an environment like that and putting, 15 new Yotes on the field and see where our best is right now, everything's going to get exposed, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think we leave with a lot of confidence in some areas and the need for improvement in others. And I think our team's mature enough to see it from that perspective and certainly have rebounded on Sunday with great meetings and, hard conversations and are ready to attack the week.
Guessing being a defensive coordinator at heart. The one thing that was maybe the most upsetting was some of the explosive plays they hit on, the big plays. Obviously, you have to kind of tip your hat a little bit because they're probably, they look like right now a top 15 team, at least in the FBS. But especially with all the new faces, how do you maybe curb some of that early on? Because how do you curb some of that? How do you limit that moving forward to avoid those? Because the explosive plays are obviously kind of what did you in this game, and certainly down the road, that's kind of what you have to stamp out a little bit.
Yeah, and we pride ourselves on being a defense that doesn't give up explosive plays and have been for years. And, I think we all got to, understand, that we went from a secondary last year with 8,000 snaps combined and here in South Dakota to, a secondary with zero at South Dakota as far as starts go. So, when all of those reps that we gave up explosive plays, really what we attribute to the four major ones in the game, all of them had self-inflicted errors on them. And, it wasn't somebody got out athleted 50 yards down the field and high-pointed for a touchdown or ran by one of our, guys athlete for athlete. They were self-inflicted. And in a lot of ways, that's, we're going to, certainly tip the cap to them and what they did to create those scenarios. But, I think our guys will learn from them, and the mistakes that happened in Ames won't happen in Beaumont.
And finally, flip side, are you pretty happy with the way, especially with all the new faces on offense, that the offense performed? I know there were a couple of mistakes, maybe as they were kind of maybe chasing points, but for the most part, it seemed like for all the new faces you had to plug in there, especially in that environment against that defense, they responded pretty well.
Yeah, I think the way we started the game showed certainly what our high end of our offense can be. Going right down the field and in a 7-minute drive and putting it in the end zone and running the ball effectively and versus a really good defense and a perennially a good defense. At the top of the FBS, we see what that can be. I think I leave a lot of confidence in what we can do on both sides of the ball up front, running the ball and stopping the run with those groups. And that's what you need to be in the Valley. So, if we can correct some execution errors and take some opportunities we left on the table and execute on those, this is going to be an offense that's just fine. They're a good group. Our skill is good. And if there was one question mark, it was, how were we going to be up front? And we ran the ball when we wanted to run the ball until the game kind of got to a point where we pressed a little bit. And our quarterback, we didn't give up a sack all day, and our quarterback got hit once. So proud of that group, and they've got a lot of development left ahead of them too.
Thanks, Coach.
You bet.
Go ahead, Trey. Hey, Coach. You had 6 players make their first career starts there and 14 overall make their first appearances on Saturday. Kind of just how would you assess how some of those new faces handled that moment on a bigger stage there in Ames?
Not great. The reality of it is we put them in that environment. We lost 55-7. So, I'm not going to sit here and say that it was great. Maybe needed. I think it certainly exposed that, and I think all of those guys are mature enough young men to go and understand their ability to be successful as a result of it. But we didn't play great football. We gave up explosive plays. We let them change the field position in punt return or with our punt team. We had the ability in the middle of the game to execute from a game management standpoint that would get us back into it, and didn't execute there. So, there's a ton of improvement that needs to be made, and those players' best is good enough to be as good as we want to be. But the game on Saturday was certainly not, to standard in any capacity. How we respond to it's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Then just final one from me. And just in what ways do you expect this matchup against Lamar to be a better measuring stick for your team than Week 1 was there against Iowa State?
I guess I don't know if I would consider it a measuring stick or not. I think our focus is so internal right now. How do we get our guys to execute at the level they're capable of in game environment? And I think when you put it into the Ames perspective, it's like I said, it's going to show every single situation that you're not. They're going to take advantage, I should say, of those execution mistakes, and they did. What will that look like at Lamar? Hopefully us, executing at a much higher level and winning the football game in whatever way it needs to happen. And again, what will be the most important thing is how we respond from that one, win or loss. This is a team that's got to play its best football late in the year. It's got to improve every week, and we've got to coach every week, regardless of outcome, to improve. Because I think, our best is still way out in front of us.
Thanks, Coach. Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Trev, how you doing?
Good.
Hey, you kind of alluded to it, the offensive line play a little bit, but it looked like Charles was effective. Certainly, just the ground game and as a whole was pretty effective when you guys were able to use it. You said pass protection was pretty good. Is that kind of one of the highlights of the day for you? Just learning a little bit more about that group and seeing the way that they kind of approached that game and came out of it?
Without question, it's the highlight of the day. I think second would be our defensive line, the way they played. Those two groups led us. Those two groups, I think if we, took the score out of it and just looked at individual execution, which we do, both played, relatively well in the game. Hard to say in an outcome like that. But, we were never, moved around, beat up at the line of scrimmage. The errors were still there at times, more on par with what they would normally be in a game. And with all the new faces, for them to kind of get it together like that, certainly, I think that's what, gives you a confidence that this thing can get where it needs to get still. If it would have been a beat-up session up front, we couldn't run the ball, and Aiden was getting sacked every other snap, and we were getting moved off the football up front on defense, we'd probably leave like, geez, maybe we got to reset our expectations a little bit. But that's certainly not it. Those two groups, and really proud of the way they're going about it. And we're doing it a little banged up, too. Marion Krim was coming in after sitting around for, almost 2 weeks with an MCL coming into that game and practiced for about 3 days before he got going. And some of those other guys are just bumped up a little bit. And the way they competed and executed, feel very good about us headed into FCS play.
And Charles looked like one of the best players on the field. So
Yeah, Charles.
When he got the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those games we would have loved to. We look back on that game, Jay, and even the start of the game is all over the place. It was. We got ourselves in a 24-7 deficit, but we were sitting there with 2.5 minutes left with the ball, ready to execute. Hopefully double those guys up in that middle eight there, and we purposely ran the clock down to about a minute, and then got Aiden going and said, all right, let's get this thing into a score, and we score there, get the ball back in the third quarter, and do what we did, in that drive, in the first drive of the game, and another drive in the game. Like, we were consistently moving the football at that point. We were hoping to be in a anywhere from a 3 to 11 point game there in the third quarter. And if that's the case, we see a whole lot more of Charles kind of running it, controlling the game, trying to manage us getting to the fourth quarter in a one-score game and seeing what happens. And so we weren't as far off as we thought. You turn the ball over at that point. They get a 62-yard field goal. You turn around and give up a punt return in the third quarter, and then it's kind of where it is, right? But, watching Charles play, like, Charles is exactly who we all know he is, and when we get to highlight him and let him take over a game and let that front get in front of him, I think we're going to see good things, out of our run game this year with him and LJ and Reed.
Moving on to Lamar, it's a team you have a little experience with from a couple of years ago when they came up. Their coach was just kind of getting things started there last year. They looked certainly more improved under him. He feels like he's got them headed in the right direction. I think they're picked fourth in the Southland this year. What do you see on tape from this group that maybe could potentially be concerning?
Yeah, I think they got tremendous skill outside, which you expect out of a Southland team. They did in 23 when they were here. They've got a good tight end group, an experienced quarterback in Robert Coleman, who's coming back after I think 3 years. He's the same guy that started against us in 23. So along with 2 receivers and 4 linemen and one of the running backs played in the game. So it's that team in a lot of ways, but 3 years older. And, we know what our team turned into at one point, and then 3 years later was very different. And I don't know that the measuring stick versus North Texas for them and their execution was certainly on par what they would expect or hoped it to be. So I think in a lot of ways they're seeing, themselves have to answer some of the same questions we are. And so I think they're a team that's certainly capable of playing great football. They want to run it. They're experienced up front. They've got a good running back core and receivers that can loosen the box up on you. So with an experienced quarterback, so offensively, I think they can provide some issues there if you don't play well, and then defensively, they're so multiple. They're getting 3 down and 4 down, and try and give you looks that make it tough on that offensive line up front. And can we as an offense manage through those looks and get ourselves into the best stuff to be successful? Takes a high level of execution to beat them, regardless of what things might have looked like last Saturday for them.
All right, appreciate you.
You bet. Appreciate it. Appreciate you blurring out that Bucks flag too.
I know you'd like that.
Yeah, my guy.
Anyone else will hop in here with a question, or?
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. We'll
Have
see
a
you
great
next
week.
week.